Part 2 of what people most regret in life. I'm a clinician, psychologist, psychotherapist, coach. I've worked for 30 years with all kinds of different people, and I teach self-mastery. How to master what you're thinking, how you think, how you feel, and what you do, so that you have a full, thriving life, and essentially put love and healing into the world. As I see it, the first part of I'm unaffiliated, I work for you. Take what you want, leave what you don't. The first part of life, as I see it, is essentially about fitting in, struggle, creating very brilliant coping strategies for various things that we all go through. And about middle age in some kind of way, we have an existential crisis, or many, meaning a crisis of existence, where essentially the fallout of our coping strategies, be it depression, anxiety, people-pleasing, eating disorders, drinking, and so on, cease to work for us. So we hit a threshold of change where usually it's some form of breakdown or breakthrough. And unfortunately, we don't talk about it much in our culture. And even more criminally, in my opinion, we're not taught in schools how to navigate being human, what to do with emotion, if someone dies and so on. And a perfect example would be, and I don't remember the name of the chap, however, he used to work closely with Robert Bly, who did a lot of men's work. He was a psychologist and poet and all kinds of stuff. And one of the men in the group is a psychologist, and he was talking about when he went back to his tribe. He was a tribesman initially, westernized. He went back to the tribe and he was trying to explain to the kids the concept of therapy. And the kids were he was an elder really to the tribe. And the kids were looking at him and he was saying, you know, people come to see me if they're unhappy and so on. And the kids were saying, you mean people who have everything in the Western world come to you on their own to talk about how lonely and depressed and anxious and etc. they are, alone with you in a room on their own? And he said, yes. And they said, well, why don't they just all be together, go outside and play music and be together, heal together? We're tribal. And he also was trying to explain to the trying being the operative word, like, how do you explain this shit to people who aren't indoctrinated and groomed into it? And he was trying to explain the concept of insurance. Sorry, I'm thinking as I'm looking away. And they said, what, you mean people insure against their houses and they insure against loss? And he said, yeah, they insure themselves, their cars and so on. And they said, well, if there's a sort of catch for every problem of loss, how do people learn about death and rebirth? How do people learn to mourn? How do people learn to be together and support one another if there's always a sort of something? You know, and that's one way of looking at it. I know that, you know, hell on earth is a thing in my view. Anyway, my last video is here, you can see it, talks to my opinion clinically that the reason we're unhappy is we have no courage. And oftentimes in that second phase of life, if we are, I was going to say lucky enough, not lucky enough, supported enough, I suppose, to evolve, rather than I'm terrible and I've lost my house and my money and I hate my job and all the things, continuous relapse, continuous, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, being the, you know, insanity, as Einstein said, or one of them brilliant ones. You know, when we get out of the stubborn ego, I'm just going to push through and go through it all again and again and again and do nothing and change nothing. Some of us break out and learn that all of the resources we had for childhood and, you know, teenage and stuff no longer work. We've outgrown those resources. They're now redundant, so we get to grow up and speak into the truth, essentially, become who we actually are, not cookie-cutter versions of every other person because we've been blackmailed emotionally and gaslit, meaning If you don't think like me and be like me, says the government, the school system, your parents, whoever it is that's very immature, you know, damaged, afraid, can't be anything other than I've learnt to be, we start to appreciate that we can exist and we can be different, and that actually the world is more colourful for it. A lot of us, you know, in my mind, we all have our own reason for being here, not consciously usually. That, as I say often, if you ever struggle with what your purpose is, find out what pisses you off beyond reason. That's your purpose. Change the thing in your small or big way. Mandela being, you know, an example. I get it, we're not all Mandela. 27 years in solitary for the most part. 27 years, 3 decades nearly, and he comes out to be president of South Africa. We all have that Mandela moment, in my opinion, if we choose to take it up. Gaslighting, in my opinion, is the thing that feeds into our worthiness issues. I'm not worthy of happiness, joy, love, and all the things. As a cultural, gross torture technique to say, you're wrong if you're not like how you're supposed to be, because culture dictates that women should be skeletal with tits, you know, beyond measure, and men should be Adonises and, you know, not toxic masculine, however, not too, you know, emotional and so on, and all the crap. And because of that system that we collude with, every time we don't challenge, when we don't have courage and vulnerability, Brené Brown, clinical psychologist, says, and I agree with her, is the same thing. Vulnerable, courageous. I cannot predict the outcome with either one with you. I can't be courageous without vulnerability. The same for you. Can't be vulnerable without courage. Can't predict the outcome. That's on you. What you want to do with this is on you. What is on me is my intention, which is to help you be happy, healthy, break out, not take things personally, not be ashamed for being human and having your edges and so on. And a call to us, you know, getting together to support each other, to be happy and healthy and free. That's what I teach, essentially, is liberation from bullshit. It's my brand, self-mastery. Sometimes I swear, sometimes I don't. You know, it is what it is. Gaslighting. Be you, but not like that. It's this clash that we have in our culture. Authenticity. Got to be authentic. Got to be real. Got to be what, you know, what you're thinking, feeling, and doing is the same thing. However, don't really do it. And if you do it, you're rude and nobody wants to hear it, and so on. We're not taught this. We're not educated about this much. And in my opinion, that's the reason why we have mental health problems, suicide, war, and so on. We're not being educated about how to be healthy and free. So mental health issues, we've all got mental health. We've all got physical health. You can't separate the two. What we don't say here comes out in the body or in our addictions or whatever it might be. Somebody, I asked, do you want a part 2? And a couple of people have said yes. And one lady basically, or man, on YouTube said, go for the big stuff, Poppy, essentially, which is the institutional gaslighting. You will have had gaslighting, in my opinion. Every person I've ever seen, thousands of them, have a story that's devastating about gaslighting. That you couldn't speak into X, Y, and Z growing up because of an unhealthy, unwell parent, or, you know, oppressive system, or you neurodiverse, brilliant brain, and the school system in some kind of way kicked you to shit, basically, because you have a brilliant, different way of conceiving life. Gross stuff. However, you know, it's planet Earth. This is not a walk in the park, clearly. The big guns, in my opinion, the system that essentially filters down to the little people so that you suffer alone with your erectile dysfunction or whatever thing that has you feel, what's the word, impotent in the world. It's just a symptom of a wider system. It's not personal. It's not about you. Your body's just speaking for you. institutional gaslighting, where essentially you're punished and made to feel, I don't know that that's right, invited to feel, or other people are recruited to double down with you that there's something wrong with you, you're mad, you got it wrong, you're stupid, you're abhorrent, I've been told in my healthcare profession, because I've spoken to informed consent. So I'll use myself as example. During COVID, like a lot of people, I did a lot of research, 1,000 hours actually. My assistant came to me and said, Pop, you're going to burn out, love, you know. Injustice, that's what pisses me off. That's my mission, passion, vision, purpose, to support other people. It's the best as I can, because I get to be in therapy so that my stuff doesn't bleed everywhere. For life, in my opinion. I come from, you know, the battlefield, as Louise Hay said. She said, I grew up on the battlefield. Me too, and many of us, if not all of us, in our own ways. Injustice. So I did a lot of research, and it's an epically long story. However, the main piece that really got me is Carrie Mullis, who won a Nobel, peace, I was going to say, loosely it won a Peace Prize. However, he won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for the PCR test, which is the thing we were using to rate who's got what during COVID. And what he says, and you can see it on YouTube, is that his invention was not, he died during COVID. His invention, he says, is not to be used to diagnose. Doesn't tell you if you're sick. You can find anything with the PCR, he said. You can't manipulate the PCR. You can't misuse the PCR, he said. However, you can misinterpret the findings, because it can tell you anything about it. So it doesn't tell you if you're ill. If you use it as a measure for, am I ill, and so on, and with what, you can't use it for that. He said that many times publicly and then died. So that got me kind of, hang on, so there's a lot of fear and distress, and I'm a clinical researcher, research psychologist, and as well as psychotherapist and coach. And I am all of those because of all the damage, and thought, I get to do this well because I'd like to be well and help others be well. I can't have your back if I'm not doing my own stuff in the background. What I hadn't realised, of course, like many, is how disturbed I was underneath all the other stuff I'd done. And what I mean by that is my underlying insecurities about injustice and complex PTSD and so on were all triggered during that time, where the one thing that has hurt me the most is gaslighting and injustice, and particularly gaslighting. I will let you think you're mad so that I, whoever it was in my life, you can guess, don't have to take ownership and responsibility for what I'm doing. I'm going to let you think you're mad instead. Therefore, best training I ever had of how to care for humans in my way, as help you, is what happened with me. Use it for good. So the last thing that's going to happen is, as a clinician who's got an education, I'm stupid in loads of different ways. For psychology, I know a lot of experience too. And I see the public being gaslit, manipulated, and fundamentally, which as a clinician, we have a Hippocratic oath: do no harm. Don't, undisclose things essentially, that could help a client or people in some kind of way. There's also the Nuremberg Code, which, if you don't know, is a code that basically says you cannot experiment anymore on the public like rats. There's also informed consent, which is, in my opinion, the absolute bedrock of everything in the healthcare field, which is the client or patient must have the information, full and thorough, unredacted, unbiased, non-censored information, full and thorough information, in order to be able to make informed decisions about their health. That was fundamentally and catastrophically and stratospherically and disgustingly and genocidally missing during the COVID pandemic. Not happy about that. So I spoke to it after I'd done the research. cross-reference meta-studies and so on. I didn't just read stuff. I looked at, who's the source, who wrote it, who paid them to. I mean, I really went rabbit holing deep because I knew how damaging it would be if I misinterpreted it, and then specifically if I spoke to it. Who paid the people to do the study? Who did the study? What's their incentive? And so on. And I looked at, cross-reference. I didn't just look at one argument, I looked at others. I'm not a stupid woman, clearly. And I know that other people aren't. And I also know, I've said stuff to me that nobody could talk to me as badly as me. So I'm worried about that. What other people do is what other people do. My job, as I see it, is to be as kind and as balanced and as well and as informed and non-reactive and so on, intentional about what I'm doing, in the hope that other people can take what they want and leave what they don't. Informed consent. You must have full and thorough information about your health to make decisions about it. Informed consent. Do no harm. In the healthcare field, essentially, freedom of speech, firstly, is not a thing. It doesn't apply, which is an inalienable right. Freedom of speech. Every human on planet Earth, God-given, when you arrive here, freedom of speech is a human right, as is the right to water and safety and, roof over your head in some kind of way and so on. It's the inalienable rights, the right to travel, the right to breathe freely and so on. However, me being a bit of a, chip on the shoulder, not quite healed, all the stuff coming out, which is not excuses, it's context, was human. And I posted some memes on my personal page on Facebook. And they weren't helpful. They were true, they weren't helpful. And because I'm having court case on court case about it, the head guy, chairman, and the first thing said, Poppy, why do that when you're quite an educated woman? Long story. So anyway, before I was contacted by my governing body, I'd realised I was being reactive and not helpful and doing the very thing that I advocate we don't do, which is, if you don't know what I know, you're wrong. Because I was really frightened for us. That if we don't have the information we need in order to make the decisions we need to make, how are we going to be? We're not safe. So what I did instead is what went public on my every pages across Facebook. Predominantly, that's where I hang out until now. I do more. And talked about it and equally said, if I'm being reactive and all that, I bet you guys are in some kind of way. Let's talk about it. Who's having what conflicts with parents and work and so on? And a lot of people wrote to me that because of X, Y, and Z, I don't want to wear the mask. It's, hurting me. And, you can, if you choose, you can imagine the kind of traumas that have happened to women a lot and so on with face coverings and all the things. There's, reasoning for people to want to breathe freely. So it's helped. However, what has been said to me, apart from abhorrent and unprofessional and misconduct and all the things, in my mind, I get to speak to what I know, to stay in my lane, really. If I'm dealing with people's difficulty and trauma and helping people speak into the real issues, whistleblow on their histories so they can liberate themselves and get healthy, of course I'm going to do that for myself. Otherwise, what am I doing as a healthcare professional? Telling you what to do, talking to the truth, be free, authentic, live your life courageously. Please don't get to your deathbed and say, I wish I had another life, please. I get to live that. Otherwise, it's hypocritical, in my opinion. Quite aside from the fact I've made agreements to be in this profession, which is to serve the public. Institutional politics-wise, the gaslighting is, essentially, they've taken, behaved like a bit of a twat by posting memes that, everybody else has posted. Whatever. Could have done it better. So I did do it better. My Facebook grew from 6,000 to 60,000 across the time because of things I was saying about common law, the law, and so on. So 5 years later, I'm still in issue about it. persons. Which is okay, it is what it is, you know, we take what we take in life. But I'll take ownership of the fact that it wasn't helpful. However, you know, grow up, do better, and so on, have done. The amount of people who this has happened with, who've spoken out in various ways in life, you know, about all kinds of stuff. People who speak into truths that happen in their family and then they're gaslit. They didn't happen. You know, how could you do this to your mother? All this kind of stuff. We're gaslit. However, the bigger problem in my mind is that we let it happen. So I'm sure, like me, in the first phase of my life, I was all mousy and said nothing and did nothing, didn't want to rock the boat, didn't have any boundaries, or didn't know what a boundary was, and so on. I'll hurt me rather than hurt you, and by default I was hurting other people because I was passive-aggressive after people took too much from me. I'm sure you've done it. And then punished people essentially silently and then denied it because I didn't have boundaries, and on and on. Now it's different. Second phase of life. It gets to stop. When you see things happening, a perfect example, and I'll leave it here. If you want a part 3, I'll do one. I saw a video, I think it was on TikTok, and it's a social experiment essentially, where a man runs up to a kid in the street, puts his hand over his mouth and runs off with him. And I don't know how many times they did this, what the population was, where it was, and so on. However, it showed a couple of people reached out and went, a woman and a man, independently, to go, what are you doing? Give the kid back. And other people very obviously saw and kept walking. Walk on by. And I'm going to say this because why not? Christianity, you know, there's a lot of people who get very angry that, particularly healers, we shouldn't be charging for our work because Jesus didn't. I'm not Jesus, and I get to eat and keep well so that I can do my job. Equally, we get to, all of us, whatever creed and religion and colour and, you know, age and all the things, history we get to have a look at, are we walking on by, yes or no? Very simple. Are you turning a blind eye, are we, to the fundamentals? Red flags. Are you listening and taking action? For the most part, no, which is why people come to me, and it's all good, because it is what it is. We're gaslit and groomed to say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. However, we do get to outgrow it if we choose, because we can change our personality at any time we choose. We can. What we think, what we feel, and what we do makes up the personality. So, for example, if you'd like to think, actually, you're a bit more worthy now than you were earlier, because you decide you're unique, you've had a history, you're a badass, you've got a survival streak, you know, you didn't go mad for too long, or X, Y, and Z, you're still here kicking and screaming. 1 in 400 chance of being here, born to the genetic makeup you are, to the parents you are, and so on, you're here. Good for you. Hooray me. And that's a thought. And the feeling might be self-love, maybe. Appreciation, gratitude, all the things. And the behaviour might be you reposting this for however long, unless it gets taken down or arrested or whatever. I've been there, done it, or got the t-shirt on, all of that stuff. Or you say to your loved one, you know, I was a bit off there with my behaviour. I'm genuinely sorry. Not give a whole long-winded reason about why poor you have a life. Or you call someone, or, you know, you forgive yourself, or you feel good because you're going to an addiction group because you know you're being the change, and so on. We can change our personality at any juncture. And just so we know, in case you're thinking little princess is talking bullshit, I've been to hell and back more than once. And as I've said before, I know every shade of red, orange and yellow in that place. And I do not fear it. And there isn't another one, just so we know. So, that's part 2. Again, happy for part 3. Like, follow, all the things. Send me some love. Wednesday, I'm back in court with the same stuff. It's not personal. Sometimes we're wanted, sometimes we're not. It's all good. Either way, I work for myself. I work for you. And I'm very happy to do it. Send in love.